So when I was a medical student, I decided that neurology was definitely a career that I wanted to pursue. And early on in my training, I had a neurology placement in our neurology hospital in Liverpool. And that was a time when the neurology service was rapidly expanding, and there were lots of exciting developments in epilepsy, and I was really hooked by the epilepsies, a really common problem, a really big clinical need, but also really clinically fascinating, really clinical speciality. I do like being a clinician, and it's been real fun over the past 20 or 30 years, gaining clinical skills and trying my best to help people with epilepsy. I was really hooked at a time when there were developments in new treatments, and got involved with clinical trials of new treatments. But it rapidly became obvious that whilst we were developing new treatments, we weren't necessarily generating the evidence that was going to inform our everyday clinical decision making. And a big part of my research over the past 20 years or so has been trying to generate that evidence to really help us use our treatments as effectively as possible to help people with epilepsy. So from a slightly negative point of view, one of our challenges in the UK is that we don't have enough neurologists yet. We're training them, but we don't have enough to meet the need of people with neurological conditions. And epilepsy, of course, is a common neurological condition. So there are places in our country where there just isn't adequate access to service, and then there are other places in our country where there's much better access to epileptology and high quality clinical services, ranging from first seizure clinics through to epilepsy surgery. One of the advantages, I think, of working in the UK is that we have a National Health Service, and whilst of course that comes with its own pressures and difficulties, it does mean that we have an ethos of trying to provide equitable access to healthcare for everyone at the point of need, without need for payment. What's really important for clinicians is to have information which reliably informs their clinical decision making. Most of the trials that we do don't do that. Most of the trials that we have done and continue to do are trials which get a drug licensed and onto the market. And that of course is very important, but it leaves us often without the information that informs our everyday clinical decision making to help us understand whether treatments are going to be beneficial for the patients that we're seeing, and also whether they are worth spending precious health service resource on. So pragmatic trials are the sorts of trials that are going to generate that evidence about clinical and cost effectiveness. But what's really important is that pragmatic trials represent or reflect what we do in everyday clinical practice. That means that we don't have a long list of inclusion and exclusion criteria, but we recruit patients that represent who we see on an everyday basis. The other opportunity that we have in pragmatic trials is to follow people up for a long time. A lot of trials in epilepsy, particularly regulatory studies, follow people up for say 16 weeks. And whilst that might tell you something in the short term about seizure control, it's clearly not very helpful information for a lifelong condition like epilepsy. So in pragmatic trials, we're not only recruiting a group of patients that reflect the people that we're seeing in everyday clinical practice, but we're going to spend the effort and time to follow people up for a number of years so that we can better understand the longer term consequences of epilepsy and the treatments that we're prescribing. Are they improving quality of life? Are they improving seizure control? Are they not causing adverse effects? And of course, are they proving to be value for money for our health service?